So, if you are incredibly excited about a massive new goal today, I mean, the absolute worst thing you can actually do is tell someone about it.
Oh, without a doubt, it's the worst move you could make.
Right. And honestly, welcome to the deep dive, because today we are looking at exactly why that is. We're pulling from this really fascinating stack of sources, recent papers on behavioral neurology, some psychology case studies focusing on social dynamics, and even historical analyses of stealth stage startups.
Yeah, it's a fantastic stack of research, really. And it all points toward this highly counterintuitive premise.
Which is going to be tough for a lot of people to hear, honestly.
Or absolutely, because, we live in a world that practically demands constant updates from us.
Yeah, Pixar didn't happen, right?
Exactly. I mean, we are so socially conditioned to announce our intentions, to post our fitness journeys online, and just broadcast every professional pivot we make.
We really are.
But the data and the case studies we're looking at today, they argue something entirely different. They suggest that true transformation, it actually cannot happen in the spotlight.
Wow.
It requires a completely silent underground phase. So if you want to build a life that most people, only talk about, you have to literally stop talking.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to you listening right now, a learner who is always looking to level up, this probably sounds completely backwards.
It goes against all our instincts.
It really does, because when we get a brilliant idea, our very first deeply human instinct is to share it. We want to pick up the phone immediately.
Yeah, you want to tell your partner or your best friend.
Right. So let's start at that exact moment of inception. You have the idea, your heart is racing, you are just thrilled. Why is that natural instinct to share our excitement actually a biological trap?
Well, it really comes down to evolutionary psychology and how our brains process reward. To understand this, we have to look at the mechanism of dopamine. Because evolutionarily speaking, human survival depended really heavily on social standing within a tribe.
Sure, if you get kicked out of the tribe, you die.
Exactly. So when you enthusiastically share a new plan, so you announce to your peer group, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. every day and learn a new language.
Which is a classic New Year's resolution, by the way.
Right. And your brain actually interprets the social validation you receive from saying that as a successful survival action.
Wait, really? Just from saying it?
Just from saying it.
Yeah.
Your brain listens to you talking, it sees the impressed reaction of your friends, and it triggers this mechanism known as reward prediction error.
Reward prediction error. How does that work in this context?
Essentially, your brain gets the dopamine payout for the social signal of the goal, rather than the actual execution of the goal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it effectively blurs the line between the intention and the reality. So you get the emotional and chemical payoff of the achievement without having done any of the actual work.
That is wild.
You haven't struggled. You haven't sacrificed a single hour of sleep. You just talked.
So this is exactly why I can, go out and buy $200 running shoes, tell everyone on Instagram that I'm training for a marathon, get 100 likes and comments saying, you got this, and then never actually run past my own driveway.
Yeah, your brain thinks you're already an Olympian.
That's hilarious, and also kind of terrifying.
It is. You've basically engaged in what psychologists call identity substitution.
Identity substitution.
Yeah, by broadcasting your intention, you've tricked your neurology into feeling like the new identity. So the marathon runner or the entrepreneur or the fluent speaker is already secured.
Because everyone is treating you like you're already doing it.
Precisely. And the consequence of this false progress is honestly devastating. Because the hunger, that raw urgency and motivational drive required for actual execution, it slowly disappears. Because you've already celebrated the idea, the brain just shuts down the biological need to build the reality.
Wait, I have to push back on this a little bit. Because what about the whole concept of accountability? I feel like we are constantly taught that we are supposed to tell people our goals specifically so they hold our feet to the fire.
Right. The classic accountability partner advice.
Exactly. Like, if I don't tell anyone I'm starting a business, who is going to make sure I don't just quit when it gets hard? To me, the whole don't tell anyone thing almost sounds like an excuse to just fail privately.
What's fascinating here is that the behavioral research actually separates genuine accountability from public broadcasting.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, true accountability involves a highly structured relationship with a mentor or a coach, someone who tracks your metrics, not your feelings.
Right, like an actual professional or a strict trainer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what most people do when they announce things, it isn't accountability, it's just seeking applause.
Ah, I see the distinction. So is telling people about your goal just for the applause basically like, I don't know, eating a massive candy bar when you're starving?
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Like, it gives you this huge, quick spike of satisfaction, but it completely ruins your appetite for the actual nutritious meal, which is the slow, boring, hard work.
That is a perfect analogy. Yes, the energy meant for your discipline, the energy meant for the practice and the struggle, it completely leaks out into this endless, emotionally satisfying conversation.
You just talk the energy away.
You do. You're running on the cheap energy of other people's validation.
Yeah.
And when you rely on external pressure, it often creates a performance rather than genuine growth.
You're just acting the part.
Right. You start doing things just to keep up appearances for the people you told, rather than respecting the slow, messy process of real improvement.
Okay, so let's say you fight through that initial dopamine trap. You announced your goal, you lost some motivation to the sugar rush, but you force yourself to start working anyway.
Okay, yep.
Now you hit the second, much more dangerous obstacle, the actual human beings you just told.
Oh, the social dynamics.
Yeah, let's talk about the psychological backlash from the crowd. Because the sources highlight this as a major external threat.
They do. Because once the neurological sugar rush wears off, you have to deal with the actual reactions of the people you told. And silence acts as a vital shield here.
A shield from our own friends.
Unfortunately, yes. Because here's an uncomfortable truth that the psychology case studies make very, very clear. When you announce a massive, life-changing goal, it almost always makes the people around you uncomfortable.
Hold on, isn't that assuming the worst of our friends and family?
It sounds like it, I know.
It just feels a bit paranoid to think that my best friend or like my sibling actually wants me to fail just so they can feel better about themselves.
Well, it's not usually a conscious, malicious plotting.
Okay, that's a relief.
What the case studies highlight is a subconscious defense mechanism called psychological projection.
Projection. Okay, unpack that.
So, when you suddenly announce a massive ambition, your drive acts as a glaring spotlight on their own lives.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, it inadvertently reminds them of the dreams they never chased, the risks they were too afraid to take, and the discipline they never built.
So they feel attacked, even though you're just talking about yourself. I actually noticed one of the psychological studies in our stack specifically highlighted peer groups, and it suggested that the closer the friend, the stronger the potential backlash.
Yes.
Why is proximity such a trigger?
It's because of the shared baseline.
Shared baseline.
Right. If a billionaire launches a new company, your friend doesn't care. They have nothing in common with the billionaire.
That makes sense.
But if you, who grew up in the exact same town, went to the same school, and make the same salary, suddenly declare you're going to build $1 million business, it directly threatens their ego.
Because you're proving it's possible for someone just like them.
Exactly. If you succeed, it destroys their internal narrative that, people like us can't do things like that. Proves they could have succeeded too, but simply chose not to do the work.
Wow. So it's almost like, it's like when you announce a goal, you're basically holding up a high-definition mirror to everyone else's insecurities.
That's exactly it.
And their immediate subconscious reaction is to try and break the mirror so they don't have to look at themselves.
They absolutely try to break the mirror. And again, it's rarely a dramatic confrontation. It's usually subtle sabotage wrapped in concern.
Right, like, I'm just worried about you.
Exactly. They might say things like, are you sure you want to risk your stable job in this economy?
Oh, the economy card.
Yeah.
Always a classic.
Or, 90% of startups fail, right? Or even something small like, don't you think you're taking this new diet a little too seriously? Just have one drink.
Just one drink. Yeah, little by little, they try to weaken your belief.
Yes.
And belief is, it's the most fragile part of any new endeavor. If they chip away the belief, the whole foundation crumbles before you've even poured the concrete.
Precisely. If your belief becomes weak, your effort becomes weak. And this is why keeping your plans private is just so essential. To you listening right now, understand that keeping your goals to yourself means others cannot project their fears onto your dream.
They can't attack what they can't see.
Exactly. They cannot plant seeds of doubt in your mind before your goal is strong enough to survive that kind of psychological weather.
That brings up a really crucial nuance, though, because what if the people aren't projecting insecurities? What if they genuinely love you, they are highly successful themselves, and they legitimately want the best for you?
That's a fair question.
Because the text talks about how even well-meaning advice can be completely lethal to a new goal.
It could be incredibly destructive, primarily because of volume and contradiction.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Exactly. When you invite too many opinions, even from smart, loving people, you absorb their individual risk tolerances, their unique blind spots, and their personal limitations.
Right, because people only advise you based on their own lived experiences. Like, if your uncle failed at starting a restaurant, his advice will be completely laced with the fear of overhead costs.
Yes, he's basically teaching you his trauma, not his business acumen.
And if your mentor values extreme corporate safety, their advice will be to take the slow, predictable route, even if your specific goal requires a massive, disruptive leap of faith.
Which just confuses you.
Exactly. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. By asking for directions from everyone else, you end up completely losing your own internal compass.
You really do.
Your head gets so full of everyone else's voices that you stop hearing your own.
And this raises an important question, and it's one you really need to ask yourself as you navigate your own goals. Are you living from deep conviction, or are you living from the pressure and noise of others?
That's a huge question.
Because the source material makes a massive distinction between wise guidance and constant noise.
How do they distinguish the two? Because it's hard to tell sometimes.
Well, wise guidance is highly selective. It's quietly seeking counsel from one or two people who have actually navigated the exact terrain you are entering.
Not just anyone with an opinion.
Right. But constant noise is crowdsourcing your life decisions on social media or at family dinners. The sources use a really interesting imagery here. Think of your new ambition as a small flame.
Okay, a small flame.
Yeah, a small flame has the potential to become a roaring fire, right? But initially, it needs absolute protection from the wind. If you expose it too early, the wind just blows it out.
And the wind is everyone else's opinions.
Exactly. Or, to use a more mechanical metaphor from the sources, think of your ambition as a pressure cooker.
Oh, I like that. A pressure cooker.
Yes. For a pressure cooker to fundamentally change the chemical composition of the food inside, to tenderize tough meat,
Yeah.
it requires an intensely sealed environment.
Right, no air gets in or out.
The heat and the pressure have to build up with nowhere to go.
Yes.
If you keep opening the valve every 5 minutes to show everyone in the kitchen what's inside.
The pressure escapes.
Exactly. The pressure escapes, the water never boils, and the food never cooks. Silence is what seals the valve.
Man, that makes so much sense.
It builds the necessary internal psychological pressure to force a fundamental change in your habits.
Because when you don't tell anyone, the only way to relieve that internal tension is to actually do the work.
Yes.
You can't relieve the tension by just talking about it anymore. There's a line from the psychological case studies that really struck me. It said something like they expect everyone to understand a vision that was given only to them.
That's a powerful line.
Right. We run around desperately opening the pressure cooker valve, seeking approval for a dream that nobody else can even see yet.
Which is a tragic mistake. Because people can only see from the level of their own mindset and their own courage.
They don't have your vision.
No, they don't. If you demand their full understanding and approval before you take action, you will be waiting forever. You have to be willing to be misunderstood.
That's hard for a lot of people.
It is, but you have to be willing to look a little strange to people for a while.
Okay, let's ground this in reality for a second. We're talking about sealing the valve, keeping the ambition completely hidden. But what if you literally have to tell people?
What do you mean?
Like if I'm building a tech startup, I eventually have to pitch investors. I can't do that in total silence. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm quitting my corporate job to go back to medical school, I absolutely have to tell my spouse.
Oh, of course.
How does the source material suggest we navigate required sharing versus this gratuitous sharing we've been talking about?
The historical analyses of stealth stage startups address this perfectly.
Okay, what do they say?
Well, stealth mode in business doesn't mean literally no one knows. It means information is distributed strictly on a need-to-know basis.
Like classified intelligence.
Exactly.
Yep.
You tell the investor because they provide capital. You tell your spouse because they are your life partner, and it affects your shared finances. That is transactional, required sharing.
It's strategic, not emotional.
Exactly. You are sharing to acquire resources or maintain vital partnerships, not to acquire an emotional dopamine hit.
So what's gratuitous sharing then?
Gratuitous sharing is posting a picture of your LLC paperwork on LinkedIn before you have a single customer. It's, telling the guy at the coffee shop about your novel.
Right.
The rule of thumb the sources provide is this. Only share your goal with someone if their knowledge of it is a literal prerequisite for the goal's execution.
That is a phenomenal filter.
Yeah.
Is their knowledge a literal prerequisite for my execution?
Exactly.
And if no, keep your mouth shut.
Keep it shut.
So if we are strategically withholding information, where do we go to actually do the work? Because the sources call this the underground phase, right?
Yes, the underground phase. It's the period of intense concealed execution. Think of a seed. A seed does not need an audience. It needs soil, darkness, and time to build roots underground before it ever breaks the surface.
Or like a builder. A wise builder doesn't stand in an empty field talking about a house. They just quietly lay the bricks.
Exactly. And the beauty of this phase is the freedom it provides. By concealing your intentions, you preserve your mystery and your inner power. You aren't managing everyone's expectations of you. You're only managing yourself.
And it keeps you free to fail. I think that's the most underrated part of the underground phase.
Oh, totally.
Like if no one knows you're trying to learn to code and you spend 3 months writing a terrible program that entirely crashes your computer, there's no shame.
Not at all.
There's no public embarrassment. You just quietly learn, figure out the bug, and adjust without the pressure of everyone's judgment.
That freedom to iterate without judgment is crucial. When you make a massive public announcement, you create a stage performance.
Yeah, suddenly everyone's watching.
Right, now people expect updates. Hey, how's the coding coming along? And you start forcing progress, or worse, faking progress, just to have something to show.
You end up rushing it.
You completely abandon the natural, often slow, messy process of real skill acquisition. Silence gives you the precious space to think deeply, to make mistakes, and to become strong before the world demands to see a finished product.
So what does this all mean for our daily habits? Because the source brings up this incredible concept of focus, and it compares scattered focus to scattered sunlight.
I love this analogy.
It's so good. It's a scattered sunlight just warms the ground. It's nice, but it doesn't really change much. But concentrated sunlight, that can burn a hole right through steel.
Yes.
To me, by not talking, you are essentially taking all that scattered light, all that precious cognitive energy you would have spent explaining, defending, debating, and updating people, and you are pushing it through a magnifying glass directly onto your daily habits.
That is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the undeniable truth across all these studies and historical examples is that life does not reward intentions.
It really doesn't.
It does not reward promises or big announcements or exciting social media posts. Life only rewards execution.
Yeah, talk is cheap.
Anyone can say they are going to do something. Words are cheap and infinite. But consistency, showing up day after day in the dark when nobody is watching, nobody is clapping, and nobody is validating you, that is exceptionally rare.
It's the hardest thing to do.
It is. And a person armed with purpose, deep discipline, and silence, they become impossible to stop. Their energy isn't leaking out into the world. It is compounding internally.
It really requires a fundamental shift in identity, doesn't it? You have to evolve from being someone who talks about success to someone who quietly embodies it.
Exactly.
You just have to let time and evidence explain what words cannot.
And eventually, you don't have to explain anything at all. When the startup launches and hits $1 million in revenue, people will see it.
They can't ignore it.
Right. When you drop 50 pounds, people will notice. The results become so loud, so undeniable, that no speech is required.
The results speak for themselves.
The sources are definitive on this. True respect from your peers always comes from evidence, never from early excitement.
I think that is the perfect synthesis to wrap our heads around today. Talk less, show more, protect your focus.
Absolutely.
You have to recognize that the early excitement of a new goal is incredibly delicate, and that sharing it prematurely triggers a false sense of achievement that biochemically drains your drive.
It steals your hunger.
It really does. You have to realize that by keeping quiet, you are shielding your inner vision from the subtle sabotage of projection, the winds of jealousy, and the confusing noise of other people's limitations.
You're protecting the flame.
Yes. You are allowing yourself the grace of an underground phase to build a bulletproof foundation. Do the work in the dark and let your results eventually speak so loudly that no explanation is ever needed.
We've talked deeply about the mechanics of this today, how sharing your goals opens the pressure cooker valve and releases a premature hit of satisfaction.
Right.
But think about this as you move forward. What if the sheer uncomfortable pressure of keeping your mouth shut about your biggest dreams is actually the exact internal fuel required to turn them into reality?
Oh, wow.
What if the secret to building an extraordinary life isn't finding the right words to explain yourself to the world, but mastering the profound art of holding those words in?
That is a heavy and honestly incredibly empowering thought to carry with you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Guard your inner flame, keep the valve sealed this week, and we'll see you next time.